At 82 years old, Maria reflects on the lessons life has taught her, but there's one decision she deeply regrets: her move to the Aurora Care Center. At the time, it seemed like the right choice. Her family encouraged her, promising all the care and comfort she would need. She believed them. But once she arrived, Maria realized the reality was far different from what she'd imagined. She knows that many others might be considering this option, whether for themselves or for a loved one. Perhaps they think it's the safest decision, or maybe they've been told it will simplify their lives. But before taking the plunge, Maria wants to share 6 things she wishes she had known before moving in. Because in reality, life in a retirement home isn't just about comfort. It changes everything. And once you're there, leaving is not as simple as you might think. Follow her to the end, because some of these lessons might surprise you. And if you know someone considering a move into a retirement home, this video might be exactly what they need to hear before making a life-changing decision. Let's begin. My first regret: losing my independence. The biggest shock after moving into the care center wasn't the small room, the fixed meal times, or even the unfamiliar faces. It was the realization that Maria had lost control over her own life. Before moving in, Maria had her routines. She decided when to wake up, when to eat, and how to spend her day. She could take a walk whenever she wanted, prepare her own meals, or simply sit quietly in her favorite chair with a book. But at the care center, Maria quickly understood that her time was no longer her own. Everything ran on a schedule that wasn't hers. Breakfast was served at a fixed time, even if she wasn't hungry. Lights out happened at a specific hour, whether she was ready for bed or not. Want to take a walk outside? Maria needed permission, and she probably had to wait for someone to be available to help her. Simple decisions, like what to eat or even what to wear, began to feel like privileges rather than basic choices. She recalls her first week there, waking up in a bed that didn't feel like hers. She sat up, stretched, and reached for the book she'd been reading at home. But looking around, she realized this wasn't her home anymore. Her books, her favorite chair, the little comforts she'd accumulated over the years were gone. In their place, sterile walls, a bed she hadn't chosen, an unmistakable feeling. She was no longer the master of her own life. The hardest part? Understanding that once you've given up your independence, getting it back is nearly impossible. You adapt because you have to. You stop arguing when you're told what's for dinner. You stop asking if you can take a walk when you want. You learn to fit in, but in doing so, you start to lose yourself. If you're considering a retirement home, ask yourself, are you ready to give up the small freedoms that make life yours? Because once they're gone, you'll miss them more than you ever thought possible. George once told Maria, "I feel useless," and she knew exactly what he meant. When you have nothing left to cherish or strive for, life begins to lose its meaning. The mind slows down, the body follows, and soon you feel like a mere resident in a place where time passes, but nothing really changes. If you are considering a nursing home, ask yourself what gives meaning to your life. Because once you're settled, finding a purpose isn't as simple as filling your time. It's about fighting to hold on to what makes you feel alive. Fourth regret: declining health faster than expected. Before moving to the Aurora Care Center, Maria was doing fine for her age. She didn't run marathons, but she could still take care of herself, walk, and cook. She had her routines: shopping, stretching in the morning, and simply moving around the house to stay fit. But once she arrived, everything changed. Initially, she seemed to rest. Meals were brought to her, and she no longer had to stand in the kitchen to cook. If she needed anything, she just pressed a button, and someone would help. But what she didn't realize was that the less she took care of herself, the weaker she became. She wasn't moving as much, and soon her legs became stiffer. She sat longer than before, and before she knew it, getting up from a chair became a chore. The muscle she'd maintained for years disappeared faster than she'd imagined. And Maria wasn't the only one. She saw this happen to others, too. People who once walked independently suddenly found themselves in wheelchairs. Previously independent individuals now required assistance with things they'd never even considered before. The more help they received, the more they seemed to need. Maria remembers her neighbor, Alice, a lively 81-year-old when she arrived. Alice walked daily through facility, insisting she wouldn't slow down just because of her age. But after a few months, Maria noticed Alice walking less, using a walker, then a wheelchair. One day, Alice told Maria, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I've aged 10 years in a few months." That's exactly how Maria felt. When you stop using your body, you begin to lose it. In a care center where everything is designed to simplify life, it's easy to forget that moving isn't just about convenience. It's about survival. If Maria had known how quickly she would lose her strength, she would have fought harder to keep moving, stay active, and push herself even when she didn't feel like it. If you're considering a care center, ask yourself, will you still have the motivation to maintain a strong body when everything is set up to make life easy? Because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. Fifth regret, losing privacy and dignity. Before moving to the Aurora Care Center, Maria hadn't fully considered how much privacy she'd lose. At home, she had her own space. She could close her bedroom door, sit quietly as she wished, and do things her own way. But in a care center, privacy became a luxury she couldn't always maintain. From her arrival, Maria felt constantly watched. Staff entered and exited for scheduled room checks, and shared spaces rarely left her alone. Even simple tasks like dressing or going to the bathroom often required assistance. Maria knew the staff were just doing their jobs, but accepting help for tasks she'd done independently all her life wasn't easy. She remembers her first week, struggling with having to ask permission for things she'd once done without thought. Taking a shower meant waiting for someone to be available. Going to the bathroom and pressing the call button often meant waiting longer than she'd like. Even meal choices were limited. If she didn't like the day's menu, she had to accept it. There was also the issue of roommates. Not everyone had their own room, and sharing space with someone she hadn't chosen could be frustrating. Maria was fortunate to have a kind roommate, but she heard stories of others who weren't as lucky. Some residents had noisy, messy roommates or ones with cognitive issues, making sleep nearly impossible. Despite her efforts to make her room feel like home, it never truly felt like home. Dignity was another difficult thing to lose. Maria didn't realize how much she'd have to give up until it was already gone. Staff knocked, but didn't always wait for an answer before entering. They spoke to her more like a patient than a person. Her daily life was dictated by a schedule she hadn't created, and it changed her. She started feeling less herself and more like just a name on a list. If you're considering a care center, ask yourself, are you ready to give up the privacy and control you've enjoyed your entire life? Because once lost, they're hard to regain. Sixth regret, realizing it's harder to leave than expected. When Maria moved into the Aurora Care Center, she told herself it was temporary. She'd try it out, see how things went. If she didn't like it, she thought she could always leave. But she didn't realize how difficult leaving would become once she was inside. At first, it seemed simple. If she wasn't happy, she'd go back home. But home wasn't the same anymore. Her house had been empty for months, and maintaining it from a distance became increasingly difficult. Her children had already started making changes, selling items they thought she no longer needed, and even considering renting out the house. When she brought up the idea of returning, they hesitated. "Are you sure you can manage alone?" they asked. "Wouldn't it be safer to stay here?" "We just want you to be safe." There was also the issue of physical decline. After months in an environment where everything was done for her, cooking cleaning, and even small physical tasks. Maria no longer had the strength she once had. The independence she previously enjoyed was slipping away, and the idea of returning home was becoming more intimidating than she'd ever imagined. Fear of being unable to manage alone prevented her from even trying. Maria saw others experiencing the same thing. They initially planned a short stay at the care home, but soon discovered leaving was far harder than anticipated. For some, staying longer meant losing their homes, sold to cover costs or left in disrepair. Savings disappeared, and soon there was no financial way to regain their former lives. Once their environment had changed and enough time passed, the outside world became a distant memory. This was the part nobody had told Maria before she moved in. Leaving might seem reversible, but for many it isn't. Gradually, the care center became her universe. Leaving was no longer as simple as packing up and walking out. The obstacles, financial, physical, and emotional, proved far greater than she had ever expected. Final thoughts. Looking back, Maria doesn't regret growing older. What she regrets is believing that Aurora Care Center was her only option. She arrived with expectations of comfort, security, and improved quality of life, but instead found reality that slowly took away her independence, privacy, purpose, and even her identity. Maria wants to make one thing clear. Care centers aren't inherently bad. For some people, they offer necessary help. But for others like Maria, the trade-off may not be worth it. She now understands she should have explored other support options. Hiring home care assistants, contacting local services, or modify her home to stay independent longer. Her experience taught her that decisions shouldn't be rushed. If you or a loved one is considering a care facility, take the time to carefully evaluate the pros and cons, consider how it will affect your routines, relationships, purpose, and independence. Ask yourself if the comfort provided is worth sacrificing the daily freedoms that make your life uniquely yours. Maria hopes sharing her story will help others approach this choice more thoughtfully. She can't change her past, but she can encourage others to make informed decisions. If she could turn back time, she would have spoken up more, asked tougher questions, and insisted on solutions to remain at home. She would have relied more on family and community support before making such a life-changing decision. For those considering care homes, Maria advises pausing to ask, is this truly the best option for me or just the easiest right now? She emphasizes exploring part-time caregivers, moving to smaller accommodations, or utilizing local resources that allow independence to be preserved. Her story reminds us no decision is made in isolation. Support from family, friends, and trusted advisors can make all the difference. By sharing what she's learned, Maria hopes others can avoid regrets from hastily entering a care home without fully understanding its implications. Ultimately, Maria's message is one of awareness and empowerment. While she can't erase the past, she can offer her experience as guidance for others facing similar crossroads. By carefully considering all factors, independence, privacy, life's purpose, health, and the ability to leave, each person can make choices promoting long-term well-being and happiness.